Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces and Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Las Vegas virtual joint worship service. My name is Sarah Reyes and I will be today's moderator. Here's a couple of things that will make our service run a little better. Number 1, please keep yourself muted and your video off during the service and during the songs. Number 2, we will turn off the congregation chat function throughout the worship service to minimize distractions. Finally, for the best audio service, we recommend using headphones if you're alone or a Bluetooth speaker if you're in groups. Please enjoy today's services.
Good morning and welcome. I'm delighted to be with you this morning. I'm Catherine Massey, Director of Music of the UU Church of Las Cruces, New Mexico. And we are so happy to share this service with the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Las Vegas, Nevada, I should say. We're going to have some wonderful preaching today and some wonderful music. One of the first pieces of music will be a beautiful solo by Sky Barton, music leader of the Las Vegas congregation. We're so happy to have him with us. We will also hear from the UU Choir of Las Cruces, and we will have a premiere of a music video of a Jason Shelton piece that was made for today by my colleagues and friends at the with the Association for UU Music Ministries. And we will also hear from the New Mexico State University Gospel Choir. And we're so pleased that Dr. Bobby Green shared with us a lovely video from one of their concerts. So in this time, it is possible, even though we're not together, to collaborate in these wonderful ways. In this time of grief and anxiety, we celebrate the memory of a great man, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and with great appreciation for traditions in the past of African American singing from the time of slavery through the civil rights movement to today, we will sing in the traditional way, which is by rote. So just listen for the words, and the word changes are there, and just sing out and sing along with me, please. Our first hymn is Somebody Prayed for Me, had me on their mind, took the time to pray for me. I'm so glad they prayed for me. Will you sing with me in the Zoom way, muted? Somebody prayed for me, had me on their mind, took the time and prayed for me. I'm so
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kalani Kachela, or XK. I'll begin our opening words with these words. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and aspire to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity.
Good morning. I'm Gordon Bailey, the minister of UUCLV in Las Vegas. Hear these words from our opening words. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. And these words are from an anonymous source.
And I forgot to unmute, just on cue. My name is Mary Phillips. I'm your UUCLV Worship Associate today. In this season of darkness and hope, we gather in honor and celebration of the birth of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose words and deeds continue to enlighten and inspire us. When we gather together, we light the chalice, a symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. The chalice reminds us that we are connected to a much larger religious tradition that stretches out of the past, reaches around the world, and into our shared future. If you will join with me, we light this chalice as a reminder that together we are a beacon in the desert. May its light lead the way to love, acceptance, and justice as we strive for personal and societal transformation.
Please join in saying our church's affirmation of covenant and singing the doxology in English and Spanish, the words printed in your electronic order of service. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. Good morning, and welcome to the continuing virtual services for the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces and Las Vegas. My name is Steve Hitchka, and I'm your service associate for today. I'm delighted to be with you this morning. Unitarian Universalism has no creed or dogma. We are a covenant-based church, meaning that we agree to live in relationship with each other according to the UU principles and our congregation's covenant of right relations. We embrace diversity in all its forms. Everyone is welcome here. You can learn more about our church at our website, UUCLC.org. In order to help contain the spread of the coronavirus, all meetings and services are currently being held using Zoom software. If you have any questions about how to use Zoom, you may contact Sarah Reyes, our church's technical support staff member. And by the way, directly following this service, there'll be a 15-minute opportunity to fellowship with one another. Just stay on Zoom after the service ends. Please be aware that religious education begins at 11:30 and it's held in its own chat room. Today we have a special announcement from David Rice, the chair of our Social Justice Committee.
Thank you, Steve. Tomorrow, of course, is Martin Luther King Day in celebration of Martin's birthday. Rather than being a day off, our tradition at UUCLC has been to do a service project. And of course, this year, because of COVID, we've had to make some adjustments. This year, we'll be collecting items for 2 small free pantries in our community. These small pantries serve families and individuals with emergency items, and they complement the larger food banks in our area. So what items are needed? Toiletries, canned foods, especially those with flip-top boxes that don't require a can opener, box foods like mac and cheese. Of course, the old reliable peanut butter and tuna, peanut butter and cheese crackers, and granola bars are also welcome for folks in need and with maybe no home. And this is a way for us to get rid of those plastic utensils we sometimes get when we order takeout and don't need it because we're going home. Again, you may, at the UUCLC now in Las Cruces, you may drop off your donations at our church library. It'll be done outside because of COVID, and we'll be there from 2 to 4 on this afternoon and on Monday. Tomorrow, again, it'll be at our church. And due to COVID, we'll be outside. We ask that those coming by wear a mask and respect social distancing as you come by. Thanks. Hope to see you today or tomorrow.
Hi, I'm Owen. I'm going to talk about Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was a minister. He graduated colleges. He was a dad, a civil rights leader, and much more. To many people, like my papa, he is a hero. Martin Luther King was born a black man in 1929 in Georgia. My papa, Norvell, was born a black man in 1933 in Texas. At age 15, Martin Luther King started college at Morehouse. By age 15, my papa had been out of school for a couple of years and was working hard. Martin Luther King married his wife in 1953. My papa married my granny in 1953. In 1954, Martin Luther King started preaching at Dexter Church in 1954. My papa got on a bus by himself to find some work in New Mexico. He had to sit on the back of that bus. In the early 60s, Martin Luther King started protesting and boycotting and having a dream for civil rights. My papa was buying his first and only home, becoming a deacon in our church and working as a garbage man for the city. In 1965, Martin Luther King marched at Selma, where Minister James Reed died, fighting for civil rights. Martin Luther King also marched in Kelly Ingram Park, where grown-ups, children fought against dogs and strong water hoses. My papa also had a granddaughter named Kelly Ingram. Dr. King was shot in 1968. My papa will be 88 years old this year. My papa is funny and brave. And I'm happy for Martin Luther King for helping give my papa and others their civil rights. Thank you for
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired. Lord, I am through the storm, through the night. Lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home.
Gordon.
Yes, the joys and sorrows I thought your worship associate would do, because we didn't have any that were scripted for us. But it's okay. At this time, joys and sorrows are a part of all of our lives, and we know that each congregation has more than their fair share, both of the positives and sometimes of the difficult things. You all have shared with your minister or your worship team joys and sorrows, and let me share with you what I have here. Diane Lee's friend Charlene McCauley has COVID, along with her husband and 2 daughters. Charlene was hospitalized but is now at home. Diane is very concerned. We also have a note from Canute, and I hope I said the name right. Canute is overjoyed that he has his beautiful wife, Liana, to share every experience with, and that he's been wanting to shout it out to the world. He thanks her for her love, endless support, and her trust. She is also grateful for the shared sense of humor. Having someone, in quotes, having someone to laugh with is priceless. It helps through the tough times and it enhances the good times. Thank you for bringing so much joy to my life, Liana Bretke. And let me just say this for all the people of UUCLV, our friends and family. I know there are joys and sorrows that have entered your life. We'll unpack those things as we gather together in the days to come. And I think that's the end of the joys and sorrows. Let me now have us enter into a time of meditation. Quiet yourselves. If you can, plant your feet on the floor. Take a deep breath and enter into the silence for a moment, followed by a spoken prayer. Hear these words of prayer penned by the Reverend Wayne B. Aronson, entitled "To Embody the Dream of Martin Luther King Jr." Spirit of life, we have come into each other's presence this day, seeking a part of ourselves, knowing that we do not live alone, and knowing we cannot live fully if we are for ourselves alone. We gather in thanks for the life and ministry of Martin Luther King Jr., not because we wish to worship him as a saint, but because we wish to embody his dream as a possibility we make real. We gather with full knowledge of our shortcomings. Our lives set before us many tasks, and often we are not equal to them. We fall short of our own expectations. We find we do not know enough. We are not always patient. We fall into anger. We cannot find the strength. We lack the vision. We wait in vain for wisdom. It is painful to acknowledge our shortcomings, yet we are here. Spirit of life, we are here, not always perfect, not always wise, not always just, but wonderfully and mysteriously human and alive. We dedicate this time together to renewing our hope. May the stories we share give us courage. May the songs we sing give us hope. May the words we speak give us wisdom. And most of all, may the touch of hands, the sight of faces, the sound of voices lifted in song and affirmation restore in us faith that this world may be made whole with all its people one. For these and many unspoken prayers of the community, amen. Amen.
Our first reading is We Answer the Call of Love by Julia Corbett Hemeyer. In front of a crowd with signs, a woman raises her fist in the face of hate. We answer the call of love. In the face of exclusion, we answer the call of inclusion. In the face of homophobia, we answer the call of LGBTQ rights. In the face of racism, we answer for justice for all races. In the face of xenophobia, we answer the call of pluralism. In the face of misogyny, we answer the call of women's rights. In the face of demagoguery, we answer the call of reason. In the face of religious intolerance, we answer the call of diversity. In the face of narrow nationalism, we answer the call of global community. In the face of bigotry, we answer the call of open-mindedness. In the face of despair, we answer the call of hope. As Unitarian Universalists, we answer the call of love.
Right, here we go. Our second reading is from Singh, PhD in Ali's A, the Racial Healing Handbook, the Social Justice Handbook, Series, page 38, New Harbinger Publications, Kindle edition. My white friend, Jenna, received a pretty intense racial socialization. She was born into the world of white supremacy, where she had advantages. While her parents never explicitly said people of color were less valuable than her white family, they did discourage her from having friends of color over to her home. Her family didn't have any people of color as friends either, sending an implicit message that she, being white, was different from and superior to being a person of color. Jenna went to majority white schools where she heard people behave in racist ways. Latinas and Asian Americans were foreigners and didn't belong here. And being fearful of Black people was considered normal. Moving from the beginning, first socialization and institutional and cultural socializations, she was rewarded for not questioning those ideas growing up because she didn't cause a fuss in her family, friendships, or school settings. The results of her socialization, however, were painful for her. She didn't get to develop close relations with people from different racial groups. And she knew deep inside a lot of the racism she was seeing, even if it was covert, was wrong. So you could say that being socialized as a white person who didn't exactly endorse racism, but also didn't stand up to it, messed with her head quite a bit.
He had a dream of a world free of hatred and anger. He had a dream of a love beyond race, creed, or color. He had a dream and he gave it to me. What will I do with it? Who will I be? I've got to stand up, shout and be heard. I've got to let my heart guide my words. I've got to steady my feet and say, what would it be like if you were king for a day? He had a dream that all violence would one day be ended. It's free, all free. He had a dream that our world torn apart would be mended. It's free, all free. He had a dream
Amen. Ashe, and may it be so. What a day it would be if we were all kings for a day, especially king on the same day, a day that would last an eternity. I want to start by thanking my brother and friend and colleague, Reverend Gordon Bailey, for being such a great colleague, and the people of the UU congregation of Las Vegas for joining us and making this great MLK Sunday possible. How often do you see two towns called Los combining for anything that is really good or a big win? I also want to thank Dr. Bobby Green of the NAACP here in Doña Ana County for collaborating with Catherine Massey, our director of music, in bringing the NMSU Gospel Choir to spread some love through the gift of song. So I am grateful for all of you for being a part of this great service today, honoring this great American, this great hero, this great leader, and a great servant of all people. I just want to have a few brief remarks today on the topic of may we be servant leaders. May we be servant leaders. No American, living or dead, is more quotable than Dr. King. Only Benjamin Franklin with some of his pithy sayings comes close. Do a search on MLK quotes and you see so many it's hard to choose. One after another is so poignant and thought-provoking, who can choose just one? I believe there could be an MLK lectionary providing a quote for every Sunday of the year. King's speeches were so beautiful because he joined his message for love with the day's most pressing issue, equality. He bound up the universal message of love. Love your neighbor as yourself. The emotion and truth content in King's urgent message captured the hearts of all Americans. He turned a moment into a monument. He turned a moment into a monument. Back in the day, people viewed America through the lens of two races, Negro and white. We didn't have the consciousness to acknowledge Latinos, Asian Americans, indigenous people, and multiracial peoples. We held binary perspective, and many still do, as evidenced by the recent white supremacist insurrection. King's message was the forerunner to the 5 love languages. He spoke the original love language. The vocabulary of love includes every gender, sexual orientation, ability, social class, financial status, and political party. You don't need a translator. We may find it disturbing to say that people who support Donald Trump don't deserve our love or deserve our love. King would beg to differ and encourage us to see the humanity in the conservative as much as we see the humanity in the liberal, the moderate, or progressive. I'm talking about a tough love, one that holds people accountable, not a sentimental, mushy, and conflict avoidant love. That's the message of love that King preached. It was universal. In his spirit, he understood all people deserve freedom and equal treatment. He believed in the beloved community, the kingdom of God, and just society. In beloved space, everyone deserves equal access to their nation's wealth. I believe human nature makes messages of love and justice difficult for us to fully accept. We have a survival instinct that drives us to make distinctions between us and them. Those distinctions cause crevices in the bedrock of our aspirations. As we heard earlier, love and service are our high aspirations. But our rational minds just won't let us go there. I was listening to a podcast recently called The Best Advice Show. And a woman was describing her strategy for dealing with the unknown. She had a contingency for every scenario. Suppose this happens, suppose that happens. What if this, what if that? There was a counter reaction that would negate whatever she hoped for. We often experience that same dynamic in our beloved communities. We're busy expecting things to go wrong, anticipating how we may be mistreated, judged incorrectly, or misinterpreted. As Archie Bunker would say in All in the Family, we're busy looking out for number one. Under pandemic, it's easy to get preoccupied with self and treat others as if they are not in the family. The one thing that helps us break down barriers created by difference is doing something for another person. It's hard to hate somebody after you've been acquainted or found yourself in a position to serve them. We don't treat people we like in ways that violate our standards of right relationship. We make those we like feel cared for and loved. Prejudice is a barrier to love. I remember growing up with relatives who were prejudiced towards white people. I don't know why they held those prejudices. I just knew that when I was in their home, I heard a lot of expressions like cracker, white boy, those honkies, and other terms that didn't resonate with my immediate family experience. Those words are the residue of what is known as PTSS, or post-traumatic slave syndrome, an expression coined by Dr. Joy DeGruy of Portland State University. It describes behaviors passed down from African slaves to their African-American descendants that resulted from the stress of American slavery. It's hard to get past the skin color when the prejudices are locked in our DNA. We know this is true from the science of epigenetics, which says that traumas are passed down from generation to generation in our genetic code. I'm not colorblind. I see skin color. When I can, I serve someone in need. I will. Or when I can serve someone in need, I will, regardless of their skin color. Now, my parents raised me to be colorblind because they didn't talk about race, just as we heard in the reading today. By not talking about it, it sets you up for a different dynamic. Perhaps it was because I grew up on U.S. Army installations with people of different races living in the same neighborhood. It's likely my parents thought to shelter me from race ideology. They believed I'd learn on my own soon enough. Perhaps they were protecting me from the realities of race and racism. Over time, I woke up from that state of unreality. That meant going through the stages of Black racial identity named in Annalise Singh's book, The Racial Healing Workbook. Those stages include emulating whiteness, conformity, confusion, disillusion, identification, internalizing Black, and finally, integrating Black identity. And she names the corresponding stages for white people, which I'll leave for you to discover on your own. Fortunately, I've gradually grown to know people of all races as my brothers and sisters that I'm free to love as equals. Still, I know mine is not a universal experience. Every day I learned about a person of color being treated harshly because of their race. They didn't deserve that treatment. Somewhere along the way, their abusers picked up that Black, Latinx, Asian, Indigenous, and multiracial peoples were less than human and could be treated any which way. People don't learn hate and prejudice in a vacuum. As Singh argues, when we are born, racism is already in place. We all go through the socialization stage of racial identity. And during this stage, she says, all people learn what the norms are, and what expectations to have about race. Basically, the unwritten, unspoken, but very obvious racial scripts and rules about how race works in the world. For example, white people are superior, people of color are inferior. Your place in the system and how you should play out your racial role in the larger society. I believe that King knew deep in his spirit how it felt being considered the scourge of the earth. He was a victim of threats, bombings, water hoses, fire, and finally, assassination. How else can you interpret his drive for equal rights? How else do you interpret unrestrained white power? How else do you interpret entitlement to capture another person of a different skin color, tie a noose around their neck, hang them from a tree, then toss their body into a river? We could ask Emmett Till's mother that question. We don't need Rosetta Stone or Duolingo or Babbel to understand, because evil is evil in every language. Just naming these acts gives me the willies. Some say it's in people's nature to be hateful. There's a story of a farmer who walked up on a viper that was about to die due to the cold. He picked up the viper, put it close to his body to warm it up. And when the viper warmed up, it quickly bit the farmer. As the farmer was dying, he cried out to the viper, "Why did you bite me? I'm the one who saved you." To which the viper said, "I didn't want to. It's just my nature." I don't believe it's in people's nature to hate. People learn that behavior. As Singh says, we learn in our families by complying with the unspoken rules. One thing I do know is that UUs don't hate. And I'm going to go out on the limb and do a Joe Biden and say, if you feel and express hate, you're not a UU. You're not a UU. I believe, as King believed, that we are born to love, but it takes a loving family and a community to love, to nurture the love that we're born with. It speaks volumes that some cultures treat others like dirt, animals, non-human, and deserving cruelty. What about respect, dignity, and equality? That was the context of King's speeches. King wasn't the only one killed fighting these injustices. We have Unitarian Universalists who gave their lives for the cause. We heard Owen name one. They died in the act of service. And the list of UU martyrs isn't restricted to Viola Liuzzo or James Reeb, who died at the hands of white supremacists during the civil rights movement. But we need to keep in mind that martyrs die for what they believe in. It makes me so sad in my body for the people who endured and still endure the outright abuse of brutality of white supremacy. And if not white supremacy, Black supremacy in places around the globe, ethnic supremacy, gender supremacy, male over others, sexual orientation supremacy, straight over others, and age supremacy, youth over elders. The list goes on. There's wealth supremacy. And now we're witnessing political supremacy, which commands the power to break into the US Capitol with blatant disregard for democratic ideals in an effort to stop the certification of the presidential election. What we need, my friends, is love supremacy, compassion supremacy, equality supremacy, respect supremacy, kindness supremacy, and listening supremacy. The list goes on. Human beings find dastardly ways of holding power over others to get what they want or to prevent others from having what they have. I think of my parents, grandparents, and my great-grands and what they must have gone through to survive. It's no wonder that I'm here. But a powerful remedy for these intense feelings of power, and abuse is service. When you get out there and serve others, especially those who differ, people with less than you, it changes you. Act not because of guilt, shame, or pity. Act because it is the right thing. And that is what love is about. They say that ML King Jr. Day is a day on, not a day off. It's the perfect occasion for offering service to someone, some cause, or institution in need. For us to be a transformative force in Las Cruces and Las Vegas, we must serve. Leadership is all about servanthood. And I've said it often, I'm here to serve. And I mean that. I'm willing to serve you in any way that you need me. And as your minister, I know I have done things that people don't like. Some object to my military service and see me as stern. I'm not. It's just that I have this look on my face that belies what I feel inside. Some disapprove of the congregational efforts to dismantle white supremacy culture. Others don't approve of my lifestyle, especially all that hunting that I do. But I hope to convey warmth. I hope to convey warmth. But I knew, like King knew, that this is no popularity contest. I came here to serve and help our people accomplish a mission. On this King Day, I call you to engage in service. Even during COVID-19, there are ways that we can serve. I asked our social justice chair, Dave Rice, to find an action for us to serve tomorrow. And he and the committee responded loudly and clearly. And tomorrow, as you heard, we're gonna have that drive for little pantries. But first, we're gonna show up for the NAACP virtual MLK Jr. event. And we posted the registration link on our website so everybody can go and sign up. It's tomorrow at 10 a.m. As we go forward, let us not limit our action to King Day. We can serve any day, every day. Find a quote from King, post it on your fridge, and read it often, and let the words become you. As for me, King said, I want to be first in love. Let us live out the dream by serving others and conveying love in all we do. Ashe, amen, and may it be so. I turn it over to my brother, Gordon.
XK, you're a hard man to follow. So I'm going to start with a little prayer that I learned in my daddy's AME congregation in Harlem. And they used to always start like this. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing to you. Now, they went on to say, oh Lord and Savior, but I'm going to say, may these meditations and words be pleasing, if not stimulating to you, my sisters and brothers in this Unitarian Universalist family of ours, and all the friends that may be joining us today. Dr. King is the reason, in many ways, I believe that I am a Unitarian Universalist minister. Without his prophetic, action-based, love-first sensibilities, I don't think I would have had much respect for ministers. And I said this to the congregation in Las Vegas. My daddy called ministers chicken eaters. In a household of 12 children, the minister always showed up at dinner time, and his parents had to feed the minister first. But no minister should show up at a house with that many mouths to feed without bringing a fatted calf or something. Shame on that clergy person. So I just got to get that out into the open, because service is indeed the reason for this season. It's indeed the reason for ministry in and of itself. So I started with this premise of Dr. King and what would Dr. King and his legacy be had he been a Unitarian Universalist, or had he crossed over to Unitarian Universalism. As the good minister before me has intimated, I believe we know many of the words of Dr. King. In fact, is the "I Have a Dream" speech the most famous speech in American history? It may be for those of us in this time frame, right? Abraham Lincoln's speech in Gettysburg may have been the one for an earlier time frame, but I believe that "I Have a Dream" speech is what resonates most with the American public at this point in time. The question I have is, given who Martin Luther King Jr. really was, what was the hindrance or the roadblock to him joining us? And I'm going to backtrack a minute here and talk to you. I'm going to, in fact, share a few words from Dr. King himself, because when he speaks to our denomination at the Ware Lecture in 1966, he's giving us a little insight into his relationship with us. Hear these words of Dr. King. He says, "I need not pause to say how delighted I am to be here and to have the privilege of being with you for this important meeting. And I do want to express personal appreciation to Dr. Greeley and other members of the committee who brought him here. There are those wonderful moments in life when you speak before a group that is so near and dear that you don't feel like you have to engage in the art of persuasion. You don't feel like you are in the midst of strangers. You know that you are with friends. I can assure you that I feel that way tonight." So you're getting a little sense. Dr. King was ultimately a wordsmith, but you're getting a little sense he's not just wordsmithing. He's telling this largely white audience, I know where I am, and I'm at ease amongst you. Dr. King goes on to say, "My own experience with Unitarian Universalism began when I was a student back in Boston University. I can remember on several occasions visiting the Arlington Street Church, where your distinguished Dr. Greeley pastored at the time. If you all don't know, Dr. Greeley was the first president of the Joint. Dr. Dana McLean Greeley was the first president of the Joint Unitarian and Universalist Association." Just to bring that to bear. Dr. King goes on to say, "I can remember beyond that in the early years of my ministry, indeed, beyond that in the early years of the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama, 3 of your ministers visited and encouraged me during that very trying and difficult period." He's referring to David Cole, Alfred Hawkins, and my dear friend who was on the platform with him, Homer Jack. These are like some giants in Unitarian Universalist history. King goes on to say, "I have worked with Dr. Jack in Montgomery, in Ghana, West Africa, in Washington, and in the world peace effort. I also want to acknowledge your massive participation through your Commission on Religion and Race in the events in Alabama during 1965. James J. Reed, I grieved him at his death, and I was glad to participate in his memorial service in the historic Brown Chapel, AME, in Selma. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which I have the honor of serving as president, participates with the American Friends Service Committee and the Unitarian Universalist Association in the James Reed Memorial Fund. So far, we have substantially helped the family of Jimmy Lee Jackson and other victims of violence." Dr. King goes on and on, waxing poetically about his affiliations with us. let's be clear. In Dr. King's early days of seminary, and I think he went, did he go to Crozier, Kalani? In the earliest papers that he writes, he questions the orthodoxy of Christian theology. And if you were to extrapolate what he's saying, you would find him in syncopation with many Unitarian Universalists of, let's say, a theistic bent. He may not be with the pagans and he may not be with the Buddhists, and yet what he's saying in his documents are so universal, I think we'd find him perfectly adept at serving in any of our congregational settings. MLK eschewed humanistic values. His walk in life, albeit brief, and I'm going to look at from a 16-year-old to 38 as that brief window. It's amazing how much folks can accomplish in a short time, right? Those short number of years, he goes from being a seminary student to being a young Baptist preacher, to being the head of Southern Christian leadership, to leading a bus boycott, to being the point person leading a civil rights movement in our nation. And yet, I wonder deeply. My heart longs for the possibilities that were there for his life and maybe for all of ours, because I came to find out when I served the All Souls Church Unitarian in Washington, D.C. on 16th Street, just up the road from the White House. When I had James Reeb's office, because James Reeb had served at All Souls, I found a document in the desk, a letter talking about Dr. King's decision not to come to All Souls. Not to come to All Souls, what? I about jumped out of my skin. Come to All Souls, what, to speak? Now, for those of you who don't know, the bell tower at All Souls was the bell that was rung at the start of the Civil War. It was forged by Paul Revere's son. All Souls Church has been a place where 4 United States presidents have worshiped. All Souls Unitarian was the first really and truly integrated church in the nation's capital. In the 1950s, they turned their after school and boys and girls club into an integrated program. And for the first time, many Blacks and whites came to worship and to have their children play together in our nation's capital. All Souls is historic. It, in fact, is the bully pulpit for everything that goes wrong with the Congress and the president. Anybody who ministers there can really lay it on them, and the Washington Post will cover it. It's a beautiful pulpit. So I want to share with you this avenue that I travel with, this dream. I have a dream about Dr. King as a UU. I had to dig deeper when I saw this letter from James Reeb. I had to go to the board and find out what they knew about it. The board members hadn't been around when Dr. King had made this statement to the church, but in the chronicles of All Souls Unitarian, there was information. The congregation in 1965 sent a letter to Dr. King inviting him to become the senior minister of the All Souls Church. They knew of his interest with Unitarian theology. They knew of his intimate engagement with our denomination over a long period of time. They knew that bringing Dr. King to All Souls, if he would accept the call, would have altered history. The question remains, why couldn't King come? That's what's troubled me. See, Dr. King would have been in lockstep with us with his humanitarian efforts. Dr. King, I believe, would have been fully engaged with the standing on the side of love issues. Dr. King, I believe, would have been fully engaged with helping to break the glass ceilings that still exist in America. We've got Kamala as a vice president, but Lord knows we need to get a woman up in the White House. Dr. King, in fact, was married to a woman, Coretta Scott King, who may have been the guiding force leading him towards the liberal theology, towards Unitarianism. Coretta, before she knew Martin, was already going to the Unitarian churches in Boston. All right. King, what would he have done had he been a minister for us? And I'm going to start with him being minister, and I'm going to take him to being our UUA president. But had Dr. King been our minister at this historic congregation in the nation's capital, I believe first and foremost, Black folks would have started flooding into Unitarian Universalist congregations in every major metropolitan area in the country. I can't speak to those suburban congregations that are ensconced in lily white communities. I can't speak to the congregations in Iowa or some far-flung place where there's virtually little to no diversity. I can say in New York, in Boston, in San Francisco, in Seattle, wherever there would have been a major population with the human family present, I believe had Dr. King become a minister for us, that folks would have flocked to us. I believe Dr. King's relationship with the Buddhist monk and great leader Thich Nhat Hanh, folks of a Buddhist inclination would have been willing to join with Unitarian Universalist congregations because we open the space that allows you to use Buddhism as your primary theological pathway, but you can be engaged with the world and the community through the Unitarian Universalist congregational life, which is supposed to be engaged with its local setting, within the context of the people that are right around where you are, right? I believe that had Dr. King joined up with us, progressive religious leaders within the Christian community would have had to take a long, hard look at why the theological misinterpretations that have been so long perpetuated within the quote unquote Black church, quote unquote white church, quote unquote church universal would have to be looked at. Why would the singular most important voice of an era step away from orthodoxy, Christianity, and go Unitarian Universalist? I think it would have started a discourse amongst the peoples in the high universities and seminaries and trickled down right to the peoples in their communities. They'd have to say, well, what's going on here? Is Jesus not the reason for the everything? I believe many a person of color in particular who loves and engages with the Black church or the Latinx church or the Asian church might have opened their eyes because it's more of a cultural thing for many than even a spiritual or theological thing. I know when I want to hear some good church music, it's not a Unitarian Universalist congregation that I go to. It's not an Episcopal congregation I'm going to go to. I'm looking for AME. I'm looking for Baptist. I may go to the Methodist because they got a good hymnal. But you understand, there's only a few people in the organized religious field that even bring the music where it makes you want to stand up and holler. But I think had Dr. King and the people that were following him, had he made that leap, a leap of faith, had he made that leap, so many others would have been willing to do it too. And the mess that we have where more than half of our Black membership walk out of Unitarian Universalism, it would have never happened. In fact, we would have been growing and growing and growing. Dr. King's theology borders on socialism in that it's all about taking from the haves and sharing the wealth with those who have not. And spiritually, that's in alignment with Jesus, and it's in alignment with anybody who's got sense. You don't have to quote scripture and say it's harder for a rich man to, in the eye of the needle. No, it's common sense that for he or she who has much, you've got to share. Dr. King would have had a global platform. One of 3 Black people to ever, at that point, to win the Nobel Prize. But Dr. King's platform would have drawn in Africans, West Indians, Asians. Unitarian Universalism would have been in the spotlight, no longer hidden as a middle to upper middle class white phenomenon. It would have been expressing itself to the global community. Lastly, with this I have a dream thing, Dr. King, no longer just the minister of the Great All Souls congregation, but as president of the association, an association that's growing and is busting at the seams because young people, anti-war people, progressives of every variety coming, because for once, instead of us being a space where nice white folks speak to other nice white folks and everything's all pleasant and we don't ruffle too many feathers and our discourse is like an academic setting, and no, it would have altered everything about us. Dr. King's access to the United Nations, Dr. King's access to Harvard University and Howard University and every other academic institution in the country that would have given him a platform to speak from. As the president of our association, Dr. King would have brought musical geniuses with him, Mahalia Jackson, so, listen, Aretha Franklin, people would have been coming to perform for UUs. Dr. King would have changed our world through this ability to sit in the highest places the nation ever knew. In fact, I believe the map of spiritual discourse in the United States and the entirety of the world would have changed, because Unitarian Universalism is in fact the only interfaith denomination known from sea to shining sea. And with an eloquent spokesperson such as Dr. King, our ability to share inherent worth and dignity with everyone would have gone viral. Dr. King's eloquence, charisma, elocutionary skills. Is that Ebonics? Did I make it Ebonics? He would have altered the nation's history. And so I want to close this with some more words from King, and hear these words. I talk a great deal about the need for a kind of divine discontent. And I always mention that there are certain technical words within every science which become stereotypes and cliches. Modern psychology has a word that has become common. It is the word maladjusted. We read a great deal about it. It is a ringing cry of modern child psychology, and certainly we all want to live the well-adjusted and avoid neurotic and schizophrenic personalities. But I must say to you this day, my friends, there are some things in our nation and in our world to which I'm proud to be maladjusted. And I call upon you to be maladjusted and all people of goodwill to be maladjusted to these things until the good society is realized. I never intended to adjust myself to segregation and discrimination. I never intended to become adjusted to religious bigotry. I never intended to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few and leave millions of people perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of prosperity. I must honestly say, however much criticism it brings, that I have never intended to adjust myself to the madness of militarism and to the self-defeating effects of physical violence. Lastly, he says, we shall overcome because somehow we know the arc of the moral universe, Theodore Parker, is long, but it bends towards justice. We shall overcome because Carlyle is right. No lie can live forever. We shall overcome because William Cullen Bryant is right. Truth crushed will rise again. We shall overcome because James Russell Lowell is right. The truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne, yet that scaffold sways, and the future and the behind the dim unknown standeth the divine. Yes, my dear brothers and sisters, you Unitarian Universalists, be maladjusted to all the hatred in this world. Be maladjusted to the point, like your minister said, it's a day on and not a day off. Be maladjusted to anything and everything that separates us. And I dare say, not just from the human family, but from every living thing upon this beautiful earth of ours. I want us all to be one day free at last, free at last. I want us to say, thank whatever is sacred in our souls. We are free at last, and it won't come unless we work hard. Are you with me? Amen. Ashe, blessed be.
Amen. Ashe, blessed be.
If you are stirred by these two sermons and would like to join us and find a spiritual home here in Las Cruces and Las Vegas, you may do so by letting us know of your interest, and we will arrange for you to sign the book of record and become part of this church. Now, we also have needs for those of you who are already in the membership. Despite the fact that we must practice social distancing in order to slow the effect of the COVID-19 virus, we remain connected in spirit as a beloved community. Many of the expenses of our church continue, despite our not meeting in person. Please refer to the message that is going to be put up on this platform for telling you how you can give to the Las Cruces Church and the Las Vegas Church, or look at your order of service. You should find it there too. This church is continuing its support of organizations, including identified by the Social Justice Committee as recipients for our Change for Change program. We can't collect your change, so please convert whatever coins you would donate if the basket were being passed, and continue your choice, your Change for Change donations. This quarter's donations recipient is Cherished Canine All Breed Rescue. Last year, this local all volunteer group rescued and placed nearly 500 homeless dogs in foster care or permanent homes. And lastly, I want to thank the Finance Committee and our treasurer for arranging for a CARES relief loan grant from the state of New Mexico. It will help us tremendously in our need to continue to survive through the COVID epidemic problem. Thank you so much for coming today.
I've got so much to thank God for. So many wonderful blessings and so many open doors. I'm mercy. Oh, each new day. That's why I praise you. And for this, I give you praise. For waking me up this morning, starting me on my way, for letting me see the sunshine of a brand new day.
Our closing hymn is I've Got a New Name, Over in Zion. I invite you to sing with me. I've got a new name over in Zion. I've got a new name over in Zion. I've got a new name over in Zion. It's mine, it's mine, it's mine. I declare it's mine. I've got a mother over in Zion. I've got a mother over in Zion. I've got a mother over in Zion. It's mine, it's mine. He's mine, there she's mine. I've got a father over in Zion. I've got a father over in Zion. I've got a father over in Zion. He's mine, he's mine, he's mine. I declare he's mine. I've got a new home over in Zion. I've got a new home over in Zion. I've got a new home over in Zion. It's mine, it's mine, it's mine. I declare it's mine.
Amen.
Thank you so much. Hear these closing words from Paul Robeson. I shall take my voice wherever there are those who want to hear the melody of freedom, or words that might inspire hope and courage in the face of despair and fear. My weapons are peaceful, for it is only by peace that peace can be attained. The song of freedom must prevail.
Please join me in saying the words to extinguish the flame. I hope we can see the flame for a minute. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
So today we're just going to do something a little different. And so I invite you to a brief conversation between Reverend Bailey and Reverend Coachella. They're going to share some reflections on the process of bringing the service together, their relationships as African American UU ministers, and what they hope for their congregation on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So I'm just going to ask them a few questions, and they will respond. We'll keep this about 5 to 10 minutes, and then we will go to the breakout rooms. So the number one question would be, Reverend Bailey, what was it like for you to collaborate with Reverend Coachella on this service?
Listen, it's scary to come behind XK, military man. That demeanor of his, he is no messing around with XK. But the reality is, I know him to be this love bug. He's just got this generous heart. But the idea of working with him was A, a joy, and B, daunting, because, you know, he's got those PhD credentials come behind that name. And you better have something intelligent, spiritual, and on time. So all in all, what a wonderful experience. And I learned a whole lot through this process.
Great. Number two, Reverend Coachella, how long have you known Reverend Bailey, and what does it mean having a colleague like him as a UU minister?
Well, I think I've known Gordon for about, I want to say 12 years or so. And I believe we met around 2009 at one of the annual Finding Our Way Home reunions that we have for ministers and religious professionals of color in the UUA. And I immediately knew that Gordon was a UU firebrand, as you heard today. And we also had a common connection of having a background in hospital chaplaincy. Gordon is a, we call it clinical professional, clinical pastoral education supervisor, which is a credential about as hard to get as a PhD. And he did it up in Harlem. He was a supervisor up in Harlem. And we just had a real great connection around those commonalities. And having him as a colleague has really been a beautiful thing, because we have a handful, not necessarily a handful, but we don't have a lot of African-American men UU ministers. And Gordon, along with a few other brothers like Sherman Logan up in Richmond and several others around the country, are just good to be in touch with, especially when you have some dynamics in your ministerial career that are difficult to have someone to lean on and to touch base with, just kind of check in with, and kind of get a reality check, and to get some good solid counsel is a wonderful asset and a beautiful thing to have, and a friend. I haven't met Gordon's beautiful wife Lisa in person. It's good to see her in the service. I heard a lot about her, especially their time in New York and up in over in California. And one day we're gonna meet. He has had a chance to meet Tamara. Tamara just stepped outside to do her gardening, so you'll see her later.
Okay. And the final question is, can you briefly say what Martin Luther King Jr. Day represents today, over 50 years after the Dream speech and King's death?
You know, Dr. King remains this spiritual force that, to me, continues to what John Lewis call it, make good trouble. Dr. King's voice echoes throughout the land, from sea to shining sea, for the people and the children, for all of us to hear. But for some of us, let me make it specific, because CPE is right. In clinical pastoral education, you're never supposed to talk about in generalities or something. You're supposed to make I statements. For me, Dr. King epitomizes what I think a ministry should be about. both caring for those who are the least of these, but possessing the ability to speak to those in seats of power in such a way that they have to listen. He married the kindness and compassion of a saint, and yet his eloquence and his intelligence and his fierce determination compelled kings, presidents to listen. So he resonates for me every day of my life. There's a good old Negro hymn. I'm so glad Martin Luther King has been in my life.
I would echo that. I can say that King is with me all the time too. Always, as a graduate of Morehouse, I've spent untold hours sitting in M.L. King Chapel every Tuesday and Thursday during my freshman and sophomore years. And some of those hours, I definitely didn't want to be there, but over time, those talks and speeches and all the good learning we picked up in that chapel named for King really shaped me in a really powerful way. I have to say that King's son was in my class at Morehouse. We had one class together, and he had that King voice. So I always remember Dexter King because we had that one course together. But I think King would be very proud today, especially with Senator Warnock from Georgia being the first Black African-American senator, and also having filled the same pulpit that King filled there in Atlanta. So I think it's a proud time in our history, and I'm just sad that it got overshadowed by the craziness of the incident at the Capitol. But I just believe that we are called to be loving people, and that our message of siding with love is our core message to the world. Makes me happy to be a UU minister. And I am glad to be affiliated and close with Gordon and both of these congregations. And I hope that tomorrow we all show up and show out in some form of service in the name of the National Day of Service. And I am grateful for everybody that is here today for worship with us. It's a beautiful thing.
Thank you everybody for coming to our special joint worship. I hope you had a great time. I know I did. It was very enlightening. And I will now be opening the break rooms.
Bye, everyone. Come visit Las Vegas when it's safe.
Okay, we will. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Take care. And they should be open now. The only people I didn't put into break rooms was Reverend Gordon Bailey. Would you like to join one?
Sure, I can hang out.
Okay, I will assign you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, Sarah.
Hello.